Left, on the roof, 10 o'clock. Hit them, Jones, hit them! You think you know what an ambush is? An ambush isn't when someone fires at you from the bushes. An ambush is when an entire city, every door, every window, every rooftop, tries to kill you. April 4th, 2004, Baghdad, Sadr City. We thought we were coming to deliver humanitarian aid. Instead, we found ourselves in the middle of an uprising. That day, my Humvee turned into a coffin on wheels in exactly 3 minutes. In history textbooks, this day will be called Black Sunday. For the generals in the Pentagon, it was an intelligence failure. But for us, Charlie Platoon of the 1st Cavalry Division, it was the day we aged 20 years in a few hours. We made one mistake. We relaxed. We believed the war was over. I'll tell you how it really happened. Not the way CNN told it, the way I saw it. Sergeant Mike Miller, through the sight of an M240 machine gun, when the ammo was running out and the enemies weren't. It all began deceptively quiet. Camp War Eagle, 8 in the morning. The sun was already hot enough to heat the Humvee armor so much you couldn't touch it with a bare hand. We were fresh, rookies from Texas. Our division had just taken over from the 1st Armored. Those guys were heading home smiling, clapping us on the shoulders, and saying, "Good luck, boys. It's a resort here now. Saddam's caught. Locals are calm. Just don't push your luck." And we believed them. God, what idiots we were. I was sitting on the hood of my Humvee, finishing some disgusting instant coffee, watching Jones, our driver, wipe down the mirrors. Jones was a good kid, 19, from Oklahoma. All he talked about was cars. "Sergeant, when I get back, I'm going to buy myself a '69 Mustang, red. Girls will go crazy." I laughed. "Just get back first, Romeo. And check the oil. The engine coughed yesterday." We weren't wearing full protection. We had ceramic plates in our vests. But the extra groin and neck guards? Many guys left them in the tents. Too hot. Why carry an extra 5 kilos in this resort, right? At 0900, we got our mission. Escort the sewage trucks into Sadr City. Yes, you heard that right. We, the elite of the U.S. Army, were going to guard trucks full of shit. The local sewage system didn't work, and to prevent an epidemic, the waste had to be hauled out in tankers. Sadr City. Even now, years later, I remember that smell. A mix of rotting fruit, burning plastic, spices, and an open sewer. It soaked into your uniform, your skin, even your food. Our convoy, 4 Humvees and 3 poop trucks, as we called them, rolled into the narrow alleys. Sadr City is a giant anthill. 2 million Shia living in poverty. Houses so packed together you could jump from roof to roof. Streets narrow, filled with trash and old cars. At first, everything went as usual. Doc, our medic, Smitty, rode with us. Young guy barely older than Jones. He sat in the back seat, handing out candy to the kids through the window. "Hey, mister! Chocolate! Mister!" the kids shouted, chasing the trucks. There were hundreds of them, dirty, barefoot, smiling. They showed us thumbs up. We waved back. It numbed your vigilance. You see a smiling child and think, they're glad we're here. We're helping them. I stood in the turret behind the machine gun. The sun was frying the top of my helmet. I put on dark glasses and turned on my player. In one ear, Lincoln Park. In the other, radio static. "Charlie 1, this is Charlie Maine. Checkpoint passed. What's your status?" "All clear, Maine. Just flies and kids. Boring as hell." We pushed deeper into the district. The Humvee growled, bouncing in the potholes. You know, back then, our vehicles were basically, well, naked. Almost no armor on the doors. We welded scrap metal on them ourselves, or hung sandbags. We called it hillbilly armor. My machine gun had no shield, just me and the barrel. About an hour in, we stopped so the trucks could pump out another cesspit. I jumped down to stretch my legs, bought an ice-cold Coke in a glass bottle from a street vendor. tasted better than the most expensive wine. The vendor, an old man with deep wrinkles, looked at me strangely. He didn't smile. He took the dollar, handed me the Coke, and started packing his stall quickly. Too quickly. I didn't think much of it. I drank my Coke, staring at the minaret of a mosque in the distance. Beautiful, covered with mosaic. If I had known that in an hour a command would be given from that minaret to kill us, I wouldn't have drunk that damn Coke. I'd have turned the convoy around.
The change happened instantly, as if someone flipped a switch. First, the children disappeared. Just a moment ago, there were 100 of them, running beside the wheels, laughing, begging for gum, and suddenly, emptiness. The street died. I stopped chewing. I felt a cold knot in my gut. You know, infantry has a sixth sense. When the jungle goes silent, expect trouble. When a city goes silent, expect death. We rolled into the intersection of 48th Street. On both sides, I saw shop owners lowering their metal shutters. Clang, clang, clang. That sound, it was like the bolt of a giant rifle. They weren't closing for lunch. They were barricading themselves in. They knew what was about to happen. "Charlie 1, I see movement on the rooftops," Jones said through the intercom. His voice cracked. I looked up. Silhouettes appeared on the flat concrete roofs. These weren't bystanders. Young men dressed all in black, green headbands, phones in their hands. And then the minarets came alive. Normally, the call to prayer is smooth, melodic. But this time the muezzin wasn't singing, he was screaming. His voice through the loudspeakers sounded like the barking of a rabid dog, aggressive, jagged, furious. I didn't know Arabic, but I didn't need a translator. They were yelling, "Kill them!" "Everyone, get ready," the lieutenant barked into the headset. "Safety's off." I pulled the charging handle on the machine gun. The metallic snap seemed deafening in that silence. We were 4 tiny boats in an ocean preparing to crush us. It all started with a rock. A heavy stone smashed into Jones's windshield. Cracks spread across the glass like a spider web. And in that same instant, hell opened. I saw a flash on the 3rd floor balcony, that familiar smoky trail of an RPG. "RPG!" I yelled, but my voice drowned in the explosion. The grenade slammed into a building wall right above us. The blast wave hit so hard, it drove me down into the turret. Chunks of concrete, dust, and hot shrapnel rained down. My ears rang like someone had hammered a nail into my skull. I lost orientation for a few seconds. When I pushed myself back up, the street was on fire. Fire came from everywhere, from every window, every basement, every corner. Tracers crossed over our heads in solid streams. I swung the machine gun toward the flashes and squeezed the trigger. The M240 shook violently, spitting out brass. I wasn't aiming, I was just flooding the facade with lead, hoping they'd duck. "Jones, go! Push through!" the lieutenant screamed into the headset. The vehicles lurched forward, but 50 meters later, the lead vehicle stopped. Burning tires and car wrecks blocked the road. An ambush, a classic L-shaped ambush. They drove us straight into a death trap. We were trapped, vehicles packed bumper to bumper. You need to understand one thing about those Humvees. We didn't have armored doors, just canvas and thin metal reinforced with sandbags we hung ourselves. AK-47 rounds punched right through the doors. I heard that sound, tuk, 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 like someone hammering on tin. Bullets tore into the cabin, ricocheting off the dashboard, shredding the upholstery. I heard a strangled cry from the back. The radio operator, a guy we called Sparky, grabbed his leg. A round went through the door and shattered his knee. "I'm hit! Doc, I'm hit!" He wasn't shouting, he was whimpering in terror. The sight of your own blood scares you more than pain. I kept firing until the barrel glowed red. Ammo was melting away. The box was running empty. I fumbled with the new belt, ripping my nails bloody. "Gunner, rooftop, 2 o'clock, RPG gunner." I turned, but too late. The second RPG hit the asphalt right in front of us. The blast lifted the Humvee's front axle into the air. The engine died. Smoke poured from under the hood. The cabin went dark with dust. We coughed, choking on the acrid fumes. "The vehicle's done," Joan shouted. "We're not moving." In that moment, I realized we weren't a patrol anymore. We were targets in a shooting range. And the only chance to survive was to get out into that rain of lead.
Staying in the vehicle meant burning alive. "Dismount! Everyone to the building at 9 o'clock!" the lieutenant shouted. We spilled out of the smoking Humvees straight onto the asphalt. You know that feeling when you step out of a tin can into open air and it seems like every bullet in the city is aimed at you? We had only 40 meters to cross. 40 meters to a gray concrete building at the corner. But those were the longest 40 meters of my life. I grabbed Sparky by the strap of his vest. Doc took him by the legs. "Haul him! 1, 2, lift!" We ran, bent over like broken old men. Bullets kicked up little fountains of dust right at my boots. Whiz, whiz, whiz! They buzzed like angry wasps. I fired one-handed, blindly, just toward the rooftops, while dragging 90 kilos of living weight with the other. Sparky screamed in pain, his leg trailing across broken glass and shell casings. Those 40 meters lasted an eternity. I saw a bullet hit Corporal Martinez in the shoulder. He stumbled but got up and kept running. Adrenaline is a terrifying thing. You don't feel pain. You don't feel weight. You're just an animal that wants to live. We smashed the door open and tumbled into the house. Inside, it was dark and cool. It smelled like bread. A woman sat on the floor with 3 children. They stared at us with eyes wide from terror. Dirty, blood-covered monsters with guns had burst into their home. "Down! Everyone down!" I shouted, but they didn't understand English. Doc just gently pressed them to the floor. We didn't want to scare them, but this house was our only chance. We took up defensive positions. First floor, rooftop. We turned that house into a fortress, our own little Alamo. The enemy was everywhere. They jumped across the rooftops of neighboring buildings, closing in. I saw their faces, young, snarling. They weren't afraid to die. They walked upright into our fire, falling and blocking our line of sight with their bodies, and behind them came new ones. The fight had already lasted an hour or 2. Time didn't exist anymore. I had 2 magazines left. The guys were empty too. "Conserve ammo! Only aim shots!" the lieutenant croaked. Over the radio, we were told that the rescue convoy had itself run into an ambush. The tanks couldn't breach the barricades. We were alone. At that moment, I sat against the wall, reloaded my last magazine, and pulled out a grenade. I straightened the safety pin tabs. I looked at Doc. He nodded. We all knew what they did to prisoners in Fallujah. Severed heads, video cameras. I made up my mind. I wouldn't surrender. That grenade was for me. If they broke into the room, I'd take as many as I could with me, but they wouldn't take me alive. I was already saying goodbye to my mom in my head. I pictured her receiving the folded flag. And then the ground began to shake. It wasn't the vibration of explosions. It was something heavy. The dishes in the cupboard rattled,
Tanks, Jones whispered. Hear that whistle? Those are tanks. A minute later, the wall of the neighboring yard simply disappeared. It burst apart in a cloud of brick dust. And through that cloud, like a prehistoric beast, crawled it. An M1 Abrams. 60 tons of American steel. It crushed parked cars like cardboard boxes. It didn't even slow down. I'd never seen anything more beautiful in my life. The turret turned toward the building where the snipers were firing. Boom! A 120-millimeter round turned the sniper position into a garage-size hole. Bradleys rolled in behind it. Apaches hovered overhead, raking the streets with fire. The cavalry had arrived. We rushed out of the house. We loaded the wounded directly onto the tank armor because there was no room inside. I climbed onto the Abrams turret, grabbed the grill. The armor was hot as a stove. The tank reversed, grinding debris under its tracks. We were pulling out. I looked back at that cursed alley, littered with brass and rubble. Sadr City was burning. We survived. But a part of me stayed behind, sitting in that dark room with a grenade in my hand.
Staying in the vehicle meant burning alive. "Dismount! Everyone to the building at 9 o'clock!" the lieutenant shouted. We spilled out of the smoking Humvees straight onto the asphalt. You know that feeling? When you step out of a tin can into open air and it seems like every bullet in the city is aimed at you? We had only 40 meters to cross, 40 meters to a gray concrete building at the corner. But those were the longest 40 meters of my life. I grabbed Sparky by the strap of his vest. Doc took him by the legs. "Haul him! 1, 2, lift!" We ran, bent over like broken old men. Bullets kicked up little fountains of dust right at my boots. Whiz, whiz, whiz! They buzzed like angry wasps. I fired one-handed, blindly, just toward the rooftops, while dragging 90 kilos of living weight with the other. Sparky screamed in pain, his leg trailing across broken glass and shell casings. Those 40 meters lasted an eternity. I saw a bullet hit Corporal Martinez in the shoulder. He stumbled, but got up and kept running. Adrenaline is a terrifying thing. You don't feel pain, you don't feel weight, you're just an animal that wants to live. We smashed the door open and tumbled into the house. Inside, it was dark and cool. It smelled like bread. A woman sat on the floor with 3 children. They stared at us with eyes wide from terror. Dirty, blood-covered monsters with guns had burst into their home. "Down! Everyone down!" I shouted, but they didn't understand English. Doc just gently pressed them to the floor. We didn't want to scare them, but this house was our only chance. We took up defensive positions. First floor, rooftop. We turned that house into a fortress, our own little Alamo. The enemy was everywhere. They jumped across the rooftops of neighboring buildings, closing in. I saw their faces, young, snarling. They weren't afraid to die. They walked upright into our fire, falling and blocking our line of sight with their bodies, and behind them came new ones. The fight had already lasted an hour or 2. Time didn't exist anymore. I had 2 magazines left. The guys were empty too. "Conserve ammo, only aimed shots," the lieutenant croaked. Over the radio, we were told that the rescue convoy had itself run into an ambush. The tanks couldn't breach the barricades. We were alone. At that moment, I sat against the wall, reloaded my last magazine, and pulled out a grenade. I straightened the safety pin tabs. I looked at Doc. He nodded. We all knew what they did to prisoners in Fallujah. Severed heads. Video cameras. When we got back to the base, it was already dark. I slid off the Abrams armor. My legs gave out and I dropped to my knees. I couldn't stand. I was shaking. That's called crash. When the adrenaline drains away, your body just refuses to function. I watched the medics unload the guys. Jones, the kid who dreamed of a Mustang, had lost an eye, a shard of glass. He was conscious and kept asking, "Mike, is the truck okay? Did we save the truck?" Sparky survived, but they couldn't save his leg. I walked over to our Humvee. They had dragged it back on a tow line. It looked like a block of Swiss cheese. I ran my hand over the door. The metal was warm and rough with bullet holes. Inside, on the floor, there was a puddle of blood with shell casings and gum wrappers floating in it. I tried to light a cigarette, but I broke 3 of them. My hands wouldn't obey me. Someone from HQ came up to me. Clean, crisp uniform, polished boots. "Sergeant, I need your report by 0800 tomorrow." I looked at him. It said nothing. I couldn't. We were from different worlds. He came from a world of paperwork, and I had just returned from hell. That Black Sunday, April 4th, 2004, the 1st Cavalry Division lost 8 men. More than 60 were wounded. We had driven in to hand out candy and fix sewage pipes. We thought we were peacekeepers. But Sadr City taught us the truth. The truth is that in war, there are no technologies, no politics, no democracy. When you're trapped in an alley and 1,000 rifles are firing at you, there's only one thing: the man on your left and the man on your right. You don't fight for a flag. You fight so the guy next to you can make it home to his mom. We entered that city as boys playing soldiers. By that evening, we were old men. I scrubbed soot off my hands for 3 days, but that smell, the smell of gunpowder and fear, I think it soaked into my fingerprints forever.